Woodstock Festival is a series of accidents and disasters.
A naked man fast asleep on a motorcycle while strangers dance barefoot in the mud. Woodstock 1969 was pure, beautiful chaos. Thousands ditched their cars on the highway and walked for miles just to feel the music.
It was a complete disaster. It rained. Also, there were too many people.
Some made love in the rain. Others tripped out under the stars. These rare, uncensored photos capture moments so wild that they were almost lost to time. Who was the rock legend too high to stand? And what secret did one camera catch deep in the forest? Join us as we explore the most beautiful and uncensored Woodstock 1969 photos. Number 25. Unexpected explosion. The organizers thought they had everything figured out. They found Max Yasgur, a dairy farmer in upstate New York, who agreed to let them use his 600-acre farm. The deal seemed simple enough. "We're expecting about 50,000 people," they told him confidently. Yasgur nodded, probably thinking about the extra income and maybe some excitement in his quiet farming community. But something incredible was happening across America. Word about Woodstock spread like wildfire through college campuses, coffee shops, and underground newspapers. Young people from every corner of the country started packing their bags. They came in beat-up Volkswagen buses painted with peace signs. They hitchhiked with nothing but sleeping bags and hope. They drove cross-country and packed station wagons with friends hanging out the windows. When the gates opened, the numbers kept climbing. 50,000 became 100,000, then 200,000. By the time the music started, over 400,000 people had descended on Yasgur's farm. The poor farmer stood watching 8 times more people than expected flooding his property, probably wondering what he had gotten himself into. But how do you get 400,000 people to one farm? Number 24. Block Party. The answer turned into the biggest traffic nightmare New York had ever seen. Interstate 17 West, the main highway leading to Yasgur's farm, looked like a parking lot stretching for miles. Cars sat bumper to bumper under the August sun, engines overheating, gas tanks running empty. Families who had driven hundreds of miles found themselves trapped just 20 miles from their destination. Then something magical happened. Instead of honking horns and screaming at each other, people started getting out of their cars. They grabbed their guitars from back seats and started playing music right there on the asphalt. Strangers shared water bottles and sandwiches through car windows. Someone pulled out a frisbee and started a game between the lanes. The highway transformed into an impromptu street festival. Young people abandoned their vehicles completely, leaving keys in the ignition and doors unlocked. They slung backpacks over their shoulders and started walking the final miles to Woodstock, singing songs and making friends along the way. The traffic jam became the first act of the festival. Number 23. Santana's Psychedelic Peak. Carlos Santana made a decision that would haunt and define his career forever. Hours before his band was scheduled to perform, the 22-year-old guitarist decided to experiment with a powerful psychedelic substance. He figured he had plenty of time to come down before taking the stage. He was wrong. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Santana was at the absolute peak of his trip. His hands were shaking, colors were swirling around him, and reality felt like it was melting. That's when the festival organizers found him backstage and delivered terrifying news. You go on right now, or you don't go on at all. Santana stumbled onto the stage in front of 400,000 people while completely out of his mind. His guitar neck looked like a snake writhing in his hands. The crowd seemed to breathe like one giant organism. But somehow, through the chemical chaos in his brain, his fingers found the strings. The music that poured out was raw, electric, and absolutely magical. The audience went wild. Santana had just delivered one of the most legendary performances in rock history while barely able to tell what was real. Number 22. Hendrix's legendary moment. For 3 long days, the crowd kept asking the same question. When is Jimi Hendrix playing? The guitar legend was supposed to be the festival's biggest draw, but he kept getting pushed back in the schedule. Technical problems, delays, and other performers running overtime meant that Woodstock's most famous artist had to wait. By Monday morning, most of the 400,000 people had already packed up and gone home. Only about 25,000 die-hard fans remained on the muddy farm, exhausted but determined to see their hero perform. At 9 in the morning, 3 days after the festival began, Hendrix finally walked onto the stage. He had a problem, though. His regular band, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, had broken up just weeks before Woodstock. Desperate, he threw together a completely new group called Gypsy Sun and Rainbows. Most of these musicians had never played together before, and they were about to perform in front of thousands of people for the very first time. When Hendrix launched into his electrifying version of The Star-Spangled Banner, guitar strings screaming like bombs and rockets, he created the most iconic moment in rock history. Number 21. Janis Joplin's helicopter entrance. Janis Joplin was stuck. The 26-year-old blues singer sat trapped in her car somewhere on the clogged highways leading to Woodstock, watching the clock tick away. She was scheduled to perform on Saturday, the second day of the festival, but the massive traffic jam had turned what should have been a 2-hour drive into an impossible nightmare. The festival organizers were panicking. They had paid Joplin $7,500 to perform, making her one of the highest-paid artists at Woodstock. Losing her would be a disaster. That's when someone came up with a wild solution: rent a helicopter. The chopper found Joplin's car in the sea of abandoned vehicles and landed right there on the highway. She climbed aboard with her band, leaving their instruments and luggage behind. As they flew over the endless rows of cars below, Joplin could see the massive crowd waiting at Yasgur's farm. When she finally took the stage, Joplin told her nervous bandmates to just pretend it was any other gig. Then she delivered a performance of Piece of My Heart that became legendary. Number 20. Creative napping solutions. After 3 days of non-stop music, dancing, and very little sleep, festival goers were getting creative about finding places to rest. The muddy ground was soaked from rain, most people had lost their blankets, and hotel rooms were hundreds of miles away. That's when exhaustion met pure ingenuity. One man found the perfect solution sitting right in the parking area. A gleaming motorcycle. He climbed onto the leather seat, stretched out along the length of the bike, and used the handlebars as his pillow. His naked body curved perfectly along the machine's frame as he fell into a deep, peaceful sleep under the afternoon sun. Other festival goers walked past him without batting an eye. At Woodstock, sleeping naked on a motorcycle was just another Tuesday. Some people even stopped to admire his clever thinking. The bike's owner probably returned hours later to find his ride occupied, but in the spirit of the festival, nobody seemed to mind. But sleeping on motorcycles wasn't the strangest resting spot choice, was it? Number 19. Comfort zones redefined. Freedom at Woodstock meant redefining what counted as a safe place to rest. One man decided that the narrow space between two parked cars made the perfect spot for his afternoon nap. He squeezed himself into the tight gap, using the warm metal bumpers as his headrest and footrest. Cars could have started up and moved at any moment, crushing him between them, but he looked completely at peace. Other festival goers walked by and smiled at his creative solution. Nobody warned him about the danger or suggested he find somewhere safer. At Woodstock, personal responsibility and individual choice ruled over conventional safety concerns. People trusted each other to make their own decisions, even risky ones. The man slept soundly for hours, his body perfectly wedged between the vehicles. When he finally woke up, he stretched, smiled at the people watching him, and wandered off to find some music. The car owners eventually returned to find evidence of his nap, a perfectly human-shaped impression in the dirt where he had been sleeping. Number 18. Fashion freedom. At most music festivals, a man walking around in a flowing black cape while carrying a human skull on a stick would have been kicked out immediately. Security guards would have tackled him. Parents would have grabbed their children and run, as they called the police. But at Woodstock, this mysterious figure became just another part of the colorful crowd. He wandered through the festival grounds like a medieval wizard who had traveled through time. His dark cape billowed behind him in the summer breeze, and the skull grinned down at everyone from its wooden perch. People actually approached him with smiles and curiosity. They asked to touch the skull, wondering if it was real or plastic. Some took photos with him, treating him like a fascinating piece of living art. Children ran up to him fearlessly, drawn to his theatrical presence rather than frightened by it. Number 17. Psychedelic family road trip. Most fathers in 1969 drove conservative station wagons and wore business suits to work every day. But one dad decided to turn his family's trip to Woodstock into something extraordinary. He spent weeks transforming an ordinary school bus into a rolling piece of psychedelic art. Every inch of the yellow vehicle was covered in swirling patterns, peace signs, and rainbow colors. Flowers bloomed across the sides in bright purple and orange paint. The windows were decorated with hand-painted mandalas that caught the sunlight like stained glass. Even the bumpers sparkled with glitter and cosmic designs. Inside, he had built custom sleeping areas for his wife and children, complete with colorful cushions and hanging beads. The family had everything they needed for their musical adventure: coolers full of food, camping gear, and plenty of space to stretch out during the long drive from wherever they had started their journey. When they arrived at Woodstock, the bus became an instant attraction. People gathered around to admire the artwork and meet the family who had made such an incredible commitment to the festival experience. Number 16. Flower romance. While families painted psychedelic buses, young couples were writing their own love stories in the muddy fields of Woodstock. One photograph captured the essence of flower power romance: a young woman with daisies woven through her long, flowing hair, her arms wrapped around her boyfriend as they sat together on a blanket. She wore a simple cotton dress covered in tiny floral prints, no makeup, and a peaceful smile that seemed to glow from within. Her boyfriend had shoulder-length hair and wore faded jeans with holes in the knees. They looked completely absorbed in each other, as if the 400,000 people around them had simply disappeared. The camera caught them in a moment of pure tenderness. She was whispering something in his ear while he gazed at her face like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Their bodies were relaxed and natural, fitting together perfectly as they leaned against each other. Many years later, and they are still together. Number 15. Romantic escapes. Away from the main stage and crowded fields, couples discovered that Woodstock offered something special: privacy in the middle of chaos. The festival sat on 600 acres of rolling farmland, much of it covered by thick woods and quiet meadows that most people never explored. One couple found their own secret spot deep in the forest, where tall oak trees created a natural canopy overhead. They spread out a worn patchwork quilt on the soft ground, covered with pine needles and wildflowers. The distant sound of music drifted through the trees, but here they could actually hear birds singing and leaves rustling in the breeze. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their dreams and fears, while the rest of the world seemed to disappear around them. When the sun began to set, golden light filtered through the branches, creating patterns on their skin as they held each other close. Years later, many couples would say that those quiet moments away from the crowds were more meaningful than any of the famous performances they had traveled so far to see. But beyond romance, festival-goers discovered unexpected business opportunities flourishing everywhere. Number 14. Entrepreneurial spirit. Within hours of arriving, creative attendees transformed Woodstock into a bustling marketplace. Makeshift stalls appeared between tents, selling everything from handmade tie-dye shirts to Native American jewelry. Young entrepreneurs hawked their wares with infectious enthusiasm, turning their artistic hobbies into cold, hard cash. The most successful vendors were those selling harmful substances, paraphernalia, pipes, rolling papers, and colorful accessories that festival-goers eagerly snatched up. These underground merchants operated openly, protected by the festival's atmosphere of acceptance and the sheer impossibility of policing 400,000 people. Local townspeople initially viewed these pop-up businesses with suspicion, but many vendors were college students funding their education or artists supporting their craft. They displayed remarkable ingenuity, creating elaborate displays from scavenged materials and wooden crates. Some vendors made more money during those 3 days than they earned in entire months back home. Number 13. Van life viewing. The thousands of vans that transported groups of friends to Woodstock quickly revealed their dual purpose once the music began. Their flat rooftops transformed into premium viewing platforms, offering unobstructed sightlines over the sea of heads below. Festival-goers scrambled up ladders and climbed bumpers to claim these elevated spots, turning ordinary vehicles into makeshift bleacher sections. The van roofs became social hubs where strangers bonded over shared joints and passed around bottles of wine. These elevated audiences created their own atmosphere above the crowd, cheering and dancing along with the performances while enjoying a bird's-eye perspective that rivaled the expensive seating areas never built for the unexpectedly massive turnout. Some entrepreneurial van owners began charging admission to their rooftop real estate, collecting pocket change from desperate concert-goers seeking better views. The vehicles swayed gently under the weight of multiple occupants, but their sturdy construction held firm throughout the 3-day festival. These improvised observation decks became iconic symbols of Woodstock ingenuity, proving that the best concert experiences often happened in the most unexpected places. Number 12. Engineering the impossible. As those in attendance tried to make the most of the festival, sound engineer Bill Hanley was solving a massive technical problem that nobody in music history had ever faced before.
The original Woodstock Festival is a series of accidents and disasters that turn into something of a miracle.
He needed to make sure 150,000 people could hear every guitar note and drum beat clearly. That was already the biggest sound challenge anyone had attempted in 1969. Then 400,000 people showed up instead. Hanley had built towering speaker columns that stretched high into the sky like giant metal trees. The sound system used more electrical power than some small towns. Thick cables snaked across the muddy ground in every direction, connecting amplifiers that were bigger than refrigerators. But the towers served an unexpected second purpose. Young men saw those tall metal structures and couldn't resist the urge to climb them. They scrambled up the framework like monkeys, using the cross beams and cable supports as handholds and footholds. From the top, they could see the entire festival spread out below them like a colorful human sea. Hanley watched nervously as dozens of people turned his carefully engineered sound towers into the world's most expensive jungle gym. Number 11. The accidental performer. John Sebastian wandered through the muddy fields of Woodstock with no intention of performing. The former Lovin' Spoonful frontman had come simply to enjoy the music as a regular festival goer, blending into the crowd of 400,000 attendees. He carried no guitar, had no backstage pass, and made no plans beyond soaking up the legendary atmosphere. When technical difficulties created an unexpected gap in the schedule, desperate organizers scanned the audience for anyone who could fill the void. Someone spotted Sebastian and practically begged him to take the stage. Without preparation or rehearsal, he borrowed an acoustic guitar and climbed onto the platform that would cement his place in music history.
Yeah, and laugh about our funny little ways.
His impromptu performance included 3 unreleased songs from his upcoming solo album, treating the massive audience to a world premiere they never expected. Sebastian later described the surreal experience of transforming from spectator to performer in mere minutes. The spontaneous set became one of the festival's most talked about moments. Number 10. Spiritual Awakening. Before the first electric guitar chord rang out across the festival grounds, a 48-year-old spiritual teacher from India stepped onto the stage facing the largest audience of his life. Sri Swami Satchidananda wore simple white robes and carried no instruments. Yet his presence commanded the attention of 400,000 restless festival-goers. The Swami spoke about the fundamental power of sound and vibration, explaining to the massive crowd that these forces controlled the entire universe. He challenged popular scientific beliefs of the time, declaring that atomic vibrations paled in comparison to the true power of sound waves. His words carried across the fields through the same speaker towers that would soon amplify Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. The crowd fell unusually silent as his calm voice delivered this unconventional message about cosmic energy. Many attendees later credited this opening ceremony with setting a spiritual tone that lasted throughout the entire festival. But spiritual awakening wasn't limited to adults. What about the children? Number 9. All ages welcome. Woodstock welcomed festival-goers of every generation, creating an unprecedented gathering where toddlers played alongside teenagers and grandparents. Parents carried babies on their shoulders through the crowds, while young children built sandcastles in the mud and chased butterflies between the tents. The festival's atmosphere of acceptance extended to families, who found safe spaces to camp and care for their little ones. Several babies were born during the 3-day event, entering the world to the sounds of rock and folk music echoing across the fields. Medical volunteers set up makeshift birthing areas, ensuring these unexpected arrivals received proper care. The newborns became instant celebrities among fellow festival-goers, who showered them with handmade gifts and blessings. Children experienced Woodstock through their own unique lens, collecting colorful beads, learning songs from strangers, and witnessing a historic moment they would carry throughout their lives. Number 8. Spontaneous street music. The electrifying performances on stage sparked something unexpected throughout the festival grounds. Inspired by the professional musicians, attendees began creating their own rhythmic symphonies, using whatever they could find.
Finally, this is a mammoth display of the young and their music in this country, a segment causing such dismay elsewhere.
Empty trash cans transformed into makeshift drum kits, echoing with thunderous beats that competed with the main stage amplifiers. Groups of strangers formed impromptu percussion circles, using metal buckets, wooden crates, and even each other as instruments. People slapped rhythms on friends' backs and stomachs, turning human bodies into living drums that resonated with laughter and music. The infectious energy spread like wildfire across the muddy fields. These spontaneous jam sessions created a secondary soundtrack to Woodstock, layering raw creativity over the scheduled performances. Festival goers who had never touched an instrument discovered their own musical voices through experimentation and communal play. The boundaries between performer and audience dissolved completely as everyone became part of the artistic experience. Number 7. Navigation made groovy. With 400,000 people wandering across 600 acres of farmland, getting lost became a real concern for festival organizers. The solution arrived in the form of handmade wooden signs nailed to trees throughout the grounds, each bearing names that perfectly captured Woodstock's free-spirited atmosphere. Groovy Way pointed toward the psychedelic art displays and experimental music areas, while Gentle Path led to quieter meditation spaces and acoustic performances. Highway directed people toward the main stage and food vendors, using familiar terminology that even the most disoriented festival goer could understand. These whimsical directional markers became beloved landmarks that helped create distinct neighborhoods within the temporary city. People arranged to meet friends at specific sign locations, turning simple navigation tools into social gathering points. The signs reflected the festival's blend of practical organization and counterculture values, proving that even basic logistics could embrace the era's creative spirit. Number 6. Communal dining. When food vendors ran out of supplies by the second day, hunger could have turned the peaceful gathering into chaos. Instead, something remarkable happened that defined the true spirit of Woodstock. Festival goers who had packed extra sandwiches, fruit, and homemade meals began sharing freely with complete strangers. Impromptu communal kitchens sprouted throughout the campgrounds as people pooled their resources. Groups of friends became extended families, welcoming hungry wanderers to join their makeshift dinner circles. The aroma of shared stew and freshly baked bread drifted between the tents, creating an atmosphere more like a neighborhood block party than a massive commercial event. Local farmers and nearby residents, initially overwhelmed by the unexpected crowd, began donating vegetables and dairy products to help feed the masses. Volunteer cooks organized assembly lines, turning individual contributions into meals that could feed dozens. These spontaneous acts of generosity transformed potential disaster into community triumph. The food shortage became a blessing in disguise. But sharing extended beyond food. Will the same love extend when temperatures dropped? Number 5. Sharing warmth. As evening temperatures plummeted on the second night, the August warmth gave way to an unexpected chill that caught thousands unprepared. Many festival goers had packed light, expecting summer weather to continue throughout the weekend. The dropping mercury created a new challenge that would test the community spirit already emerging across the grounds. A young man from California found himself shivering in just a thin cotton shirt, having left his jacket back home. Nearby, a woman from New York noticed his discomfort and wordlessly spread her woolen blanket wide enough for both of them to share. They had never spoken before this moment, yet the simple gesture created an instant bond that lasted through the night. Similar scenes unfolded throughout the festival as strangers huddled together under makeshift shelters and shared clothing. Body heat became another resource that people freely offered to those in need. These acts of physical kindness reinforced the growing sense that Woodstock had transformed from a music festival into something resembling a temporary family reunion. Number 4. Kindness to strangers. When the afternoon rain turned the festival grounds into a muddy maze, 3 strangers demonstrated the generosity that became Woodstock's defining characteristic. 2 men had constructed a sturdy lean-to shelter from tarps and wooden poles, creating a dry refuge that could easily accommodate their small group. As storm clouds gathered overhead, they spotted a soaked festival goer struggling to find cover.
Now, as far as the rain, while surrounding towns here, as we heard, got about 1.5 inches, here in Woodstock, according to residents and the Lost River rain gauge confirms.
Without hesitation, they waved the stranger over and made room under their makeshift roof. The invitation extended beyond simple shelter as they shared their remaining food supplies and offered dry clothing from their backpacks. The rescued festival goer had nothing to offer in return except gratitude. Yet the gesture felt completely natural to everyone involved. This scene repeated itself countless times across the festival grounds as temporary communities formed around acts of spontaneous kindness. People who had never met became protectors of one another, creating a safety net that made survival possible for hundreds of thousands. Number 3. Musical Marathon. The sheer scale of Woodstock's musical programming defied belief, with over 30 bands scheduled to perform across just 3 days. Festival organizers had assembled a lineup that read like a dream roster of the era's most influential artists, creating what would become the most legendary concert bill in rock history. The marathon began with folk singers and acoustic acts, gradually building toward the explosive electric performances that would define the weekend. Each band brought their own devoted following, yet the massive crowd embraced every musical style with equal enthusiasm. From blues legends to psychedelic rock pioneers, the diversity reflected the changing landscape of American music. Technical crews worked around the clock to manage the complex logistics of switching equipment between acts while maintaining sound quality for hundreds of thousands of listeners. The tight scheduling meant some performers took the stage hours behind schedule, yet audiences remained patient and supportive throughout the delays. This musical endurance test created an atmosphere where lesser-known opening acts shared equal billing with established superstars, giving emerging artists career-defining exposure to the largest audience many would ever face. Number 2. Weather can't dampen spirits. After 2 days of intermittent downpours that turned the festival grounds into a sprawling mud pit, nature finally offered relief. Dark storm clouds that had dominated the sky began breaking apart, allowing brilliant shafts of sunlight to pierce through and illuminate the massive gathering below. The transformation was immediate and electric. 400,000 rain-soaked festival-goers looked up simultaneously as golden light bathed the fields for the first time since Friday morning. Spontaneous cheers erupted across the entire venue as people raised their arms toward the sky in celebration. The collective roar of joy could be heard for miles beyond the festival boundaries. Muddy clothes and soggy sleeping bags suddenly seemed insignificant as the warmth returned to their faces. People began dancing in place, shaking off the dampness that had defined their weekend experience. Steam rose from the wet earth as the sun worked its magic on the saturated ground. This moment of natural drama created one of Woodstock's most memorable scenes, proving that shared hardship followed by collective relief could unite strangers more powerfully than any planned event. Whatever happened to the man who made it possible? Number 1. The bitter aftermath. Max Yasgur never expected his decision to rent pasture land to festival organizers would destroy his life in the local community. The dairy farmer had agreed to host what he believed would be a 50,000-person gathering, only to watch 400,000 people transform his property into the most famous music festival in history. When the crowds finally departed on Monday morning, Yasgur faced the devastating aftermath alone. His neighbors, who had endured 3 days of impossible traffic jams, overflowing portable toilets, and strangers camping in their yards, turned their anger directly toward him. The local community that had supported his family for generations suddenly treated them like outcasts. Store owners refused to serve the Yasgurs, and longtime friends crossed the street to avoid conversation. The man who had inadvertently created a symbol of peace and love found himself ostracized by the very people he had lived among his entire life. The festival that preached acceptance and brotherhood had cost him his place in the only community he had ever known. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.